Meeting of the City of Jefferson Historic Preservation Commission. My name is Alan Weed, and I am the chairperson of the commission. We'll start with Aaron. If you'll introduce yourself.
Yes, Aaron Ely, and I'm the council liaison to the Historic Preservation Commission.
Okay. And will you introduce yourself also?
Yeah, I'm Mackenzie Jobe. I'm newly elected to the City Council. I'm just here to listen and take it all in.
Oh, I'm Tiffany Patterson, member of the commission.
I'm a Deeds member of the commission.
Brad Shaver, member of the commission.
Rachel Senzi, city staff.
Amanda Gallagher, city staff.
Smith,
City staff.
Oh, we're gonna do Laura.
Oh, and Laura.
Laura Ward, council member, or commissioner member.
All right. We do have a quorum present. Can I have a motion to adopt the agenda as printed or amended?
Second.
Okay. All in favor say yes.
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 The motion carries. Okay, new business, RFP East Capitol Avenue redevelopment project rate request. Rachel, can you provide a summary of the council request?
Within your packet, we kind of included a background and context. This project regarding East Capitol Avenue really started with the East Capitol Avenue Urban Renewal Plan in 2016. We partnered with the Jefferson City Public Housing Authority. They have the ability through LCRA to act as the agent for acquisition and disposition within the redevelopment area. There was a blight study completed, and within that East Capitol Avenue renewal plan, they anticipate completion for the entire area is December 31st of 2026. So there's kind of a larger project happening, and then we're working our way through it. Through the Housing Authority, we were able to offer up for acquisition several properties, including 101 Jackson Street, which I'll have photos up on the screen because some of them have some before and after. So you can see the progress that was being made. 103 Jackson Street, 105. 500 East Capitol is also currently being rehabilitated. 501 East Capitol Avenue. 507 East Capitol Avenue. 511 East Capitol Avenue. 513 East Capitol Avenue. And 608 East State Street. In April of 2022, the City Council adopted Ordinance 16216 and established a plan to go ahead and work on the rest of the projects. Do you mind, can I have access to click that? Oh, they're not there anymore. To establish a plan for remaining properties. Can you go get IT, please? Because I need to be able to pull up that. I can't click on it. Or if you can do it from the established plan is just within your packet. Let me see if I can find the page number real quick. So the plan that I'm trying to pull up on the screen is on page 4 of your packet. And that really outlined from start to finish how the rest of the properties were going to be offered up. It starts off with 108 and 104 Jackson. We utilized neighborhood stabilization program funds to demo 108 Jackson. The next phase is that we ordered a third-party structural assessment of the remaining properties. We did utilize partial city funds and historic preservation funds to hire Allstate. They went into the properties and provided structural assessments on what was needed to stabilize the properties and how much those stabilization efforts were going to cost. Once that was done, City Council determined whether properties should be demolished and cleared or if it was reasonable to be rehabilitated. So if there were we went ahead and opened up a call for interested parties. And what that process was, if there was an interested party for rehab, those folks had the ability to put down a bid guarantee to save those properties from demolition. So if you'll remember the dangerous building process, the abatement of that was to demolish. So that was the process that was put in place to be able to save those properties. So interested parties were allowed to enter into a bid guarantee. The bid guarantee agreement stated that if the city acquired the property, the interested party guarantees that it will submit a redevelopment proposal for the property that includes the purchase price. I still can't click on the link. So going to page 5, we are on that, out of that plan, we are on the second to last bullet point, so we've almost made it through the plan. So we're at if the city acquires the property, the city will issue a request for proposals seeking redevelopment proposals. So that's kind of a background of where we were and where we're at. Yeah, that's fine. There we go. It's okay, we can go ahead and move on. Okay, so where we're at, up on the map, you have the East Capitol Avenue, all the properties, including vacant lots that are within the RFP. So within the RFP, which starts on page 10, you have 2 sets of properties that you're looking at. You got parcels that are vacant lots, which are all the properties identified in green. We also have the parcels that have existing structures on them are identified in yellow. I will note that we did sell 413 and 419, utilizing a very similar, if not the same, request for proposal process that we have currently. And that's where we are throughout the course since 2016, since we've started working on this, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the commission has.
Does anyone have any questions for Rachel?
Questions?
Are you ready for questions from the public?
If you're ready.
Okay. If anyone would like to speak from the public, if you come to the podium and then identify yourself before you speak. Jenny?
I don't know if you want me to talk about going forward, or did you want to address questions about the history?
No, that's good. So the point of this meeting is that at the April 15th City Council meeting, it was requested that the request for the proposals, the draft request, was sent to the Historic Preservation Commission for review. And if the Historic Preservation Commission has any recommendations, we can put that in a memo to send to Public Works and Planning and eventually City Council.
Could I just piggyback off of what Rachel said? I made the recommendation at the city council meeting that the motion by Councilman Schwartz to send this to the Public Works and Planning Committee also includes sending this to the Historic Preservation Commission. I want to make sure that when decisions made in this city impact the historic landscape of the city, which is what this RFP could inevitably do, that this body is notified and this body has an opportunity to review. And so that was my intent based on that action. So, you know, I appreciate this commission. This commission has vast knowledge of historic preservation that I certainly don't have. And when I'm not the expert, the expert ask advice and seek guidance. So that, again, is the reason that I asked for the brief side of the commission. One thing that I've heard is there is possibly somewhat of a consensus that maybe one of the things this RFP could include is some sort of scoring criteria to outline what the city will look for and how the city will evaluate the proposals that it receives. So I defer, back to the commission, but that's something that the body may want to consider.
Okay, Jenny?
Thank you. I'm Jenny Smith. Tony Smith and I, we are one of the interested parties that put down some escrow money in 401 East Capitol. And I want to thank this committee for doing this special meeting to address this RFP because, of course, I think you all appreciate time is of the essence. And every time it rains, we're all worried about the further decay of these buildings. I think the biggest obstacle we have in saving this neighborhood is that we still have people, city leaders, in charge of making decisions about this block that are not committed to saving the block, that are committed to putting up townhomes or businesses or whatever. But I think we have plenty of space in the city for those types of developments, but we have an existing history on Capitol Avenue. I know you all are aware of that. And I've tried to appeal to them, and that's really our biggest obstacle, is appealing to them the importance of saving this historic neighborhood. It is like if you have a double-barrel shotgun that belonged to your great-grandfather, it's hard to put a dollar value on that because it goes back in your family. I mean, it's not just worth $500 because that's the market price for that. It's a family heirloom and it connects you to your past, just like these properties are city heirlooms. They connect us to that past. You take them down, you lose that connection. And you can look at the names on that street. Houchin, Hobbs, Ewings, Young, they're all over our street because those were the city leaders. They built this city. So I just want us to emphasize that we need to make sure our city leaders understand that connection it brings to our past. But on this RFP, I would ask that, well, for one thing, there's no assurance that a proposal for demolition will not be accepted by the city council. And I think that RFP needs to specify that proposals for rehabilitation of the existing structure on that lot, that be prioritized over demolition. So like I'm saying, we never expected, we were always told that we would not even get any special consideration for having put down money, okay? We were told that, we understood that, but I don't think any of us ever expected that somebody's proposal for demolition might be favored over ours. Because why would we put down $5,000 and commit it for 18 months if it's just to delay demolition? So I was really kind of shocked at that outcome. That was not something that was ever specified in our promissory agreement with the city to put down a proposal. I think you can say, well, it was implied but never specified. Well, I don't think that the city council that put together that 2016 overlay district, I do not think it was their intent that future development on this would include tearing down everything we could. So that's one ask, I would say. One sentence in there. Prioritize rehabilitation over demolition. The second thing, and Councilman Millie alluded to this, and that's a scoring system. Now, I will say, you could give more weight to things like, oh, they put down some money. They're the reason why these properties are still here and standing. You could give some weight to those people. You could also give weight to somebody's offered a lot more money, had a higher proposal. You could give weight for someone who has a shorter time frame in which they will get it all done. But here's my concern about, and I want to see that happen, but I'm concerned about how long it's going to take to figure out that weighting system and that scoring system. And is that going to delay this process even more? I mean, even every month that goes by is a concern. So I know that's something you need to, you'll figure out, because I know you guys are all, you share some of my concerns. So I know I'll leave it in your competent hands. So any questions of me?
Any questions for Jenny?
Thank you all.
Thank you. So Rachel, I have a question for you then. Okay, so at this point, everything has been demoed that the city saw that needed to be demoed to date.
Correct.
Correct.
So that was, if we were to follow what's outlined in city code, most of those buildings all of those buildings would have been demolished based off of the threshold and the damage that was sustained to them. But when we went to city council, city council has the authority to override existing code by creating a new ordinance. And so that's the ordinance that we talked about that created the plan. So the plan allowed people to put down earnest money in order to prevent that demolition, because the city did not own the properties at that time. So we could have demolished by abatement, and then the demo would have been tax liened onto the property owner. But we didn't really have an ability to put out an RFP at that time for acquisition, because we just recently became the owners of those properties. Does that answer your question? So if a demolition were to occur right now, it would be under the new, whoever became the property owner, or if there
At this point, the city owns.
Right.
And it would go through the same process for our review before.
Not if
Would
it's
not come to our review.
Not if it's city
Not
owned.
if it's
City owns it.
So you would skip it.
But we are under obligation to act through that plan. So we are still going under ordinance, what do I say, ordinance 16216. So we are following the plan as staff.
But the plan says that the city could demo it.
We've already passed that phase. So if you go to,
But there's nothing saying though that the properties, that the existing structures are protected at this point.
yes, that ordinance. So if you go to page 4 of your packet, that memo, and you look at the bullet points that are there, we've demoed 108 Jackson, 104 Jackson, and almost, I don't know if any of those were ever the vacant properties that are there. So the green that you see up on the screen, those demolitions have already occurred under this plan. So those properties did not receive anybody interested, and nobody put in a bid guarantee. So the next move was the city went ahead and demoed those. And now we're into now that we went through the condemnation process, we were awarded the remaining properties. We have ownership of the remaining vacant lots, as well as those 5 yellow properties that have buildings on them. So the RFP is how the city would allow the members of the public to both bid on the parcels that have buildings on them and the green vacant lots.
At that point, they become the building owner.
Yes, like once a proposal is accepted, but so what we're doing here is we're trying to see if we can put out an RFP.
So they would become the building owner, and they would have to request demolition, which would go,
Yes.
If they
go
were.
through the process.
Yes, that's correct.
Motion for the RFP when ready.
Here, let's see if there's, okay. Look, why don't we go ahead and go with the public first, Aaron, and then we'll come back around to you, okay?
I'm Holly Stitt, and I own several properties on Capitol Avenue. Some that are being rehabbed, 501, 513, 507. Currently that were Bisher things. I was also involved when we put the overlay in the area because I own property down there. The overlay was put together by the property owners of Capitol Avenue for this very reason, because we knew some of those buildings would not exist, or the buildings that did get out there for development could retain their somewhat historic aspects. So all of us that were investing in that area at the time could maintain our property, whatever it is that Capitol Avenue is. We know that's the historic area, and that's exactly why we put this in. And that was done, I'm rehabbing 2 buildings. I've got one that's done, 513, and 2 buildings under this overlay without any extra restrictions or any extra cost that would be on anything else. And the one thing that this RFP does allow for is coming in with a reduction on the overlay properties, which if they put it into a PUD, they can do that as well. So it's a kind of a weird win. But the other side of it is this RFP is like not necessarily going out as the existing buildings. It's kind of going out as a blanket, any of these vacant ones, but you can pull off one if you want. So there's an implication there that if you want to take all these properties, you're going to be great, even if you want to demolish these to build something else. Because of not having any criteria or any expectations of what the evaluation of who gets those RFPs other than what we think is best is not in that RFP, that's where the unfairness comes into, I feel, with a whole lot of stuff. Jenny put money on 401 to save it. Cam Peter put money on, he put $11,800 on the funeral home to save it. They knew they weren't getting a special thing, but they did not want it demolished. Here's an RFP that allows someone to come in and take almost a whole block and be able to develop it because they can take down this building that's in the middle or a half a block or whatever. And without that criteria, there's nothing that's going to stop that from happening, because it's up to the city council to decide if that proposal, or whoever's on the committee, whoever does the decision making, it's up to them to decide, because there's no criteria of evaluation for an RFP, which is very unusual for any RFP. I also worked with Ryan and the city to come up with this plan. I spent quite a few hours with him. The plan was not for these to be demolished. If somebody put money on them, they would be in a rehab state. And the contracts that went out to the people that put money on there states that they don't get demolished unless there is a safety matter that's beyond the control for the community. So to allow them to be put into an RFP or a proposal from someone that allows the demolition just allowed these people to put money into a non-interest bearing account for 18 months for no reason. And I think we really need to look at that. And that's the decision that needs to be made here. Regardless of what the wording is, the decision needs to be made here going forward, how we are going to protect our historic mile and how we're going to protect these houses that are historic and the people who've already put tons of money into that street to keep it the way it is.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments? Yes.
I'm Mike Lester, City Council Ward 2. Just wanted to say that Councilman Mealy and I talked about the proposal before it was to come before the City Council, and I know we were going to offer some amendments to it. There's language in there that, looking at the proposal, we thought it didn't really have enough in it. It related to the context of this being a historic district and emphasizing that, and for whatever's developed to fit into that. So we did offer some specific language, and I'd like to know what the commission thinks of that language. So I'll just read it to you, and I'm sorry I didn't make copies, but I could so we can get copies. But language we would want to offer to put in there, which was in the section on information about the redevelopment plan. And it was language to say, in consideration that your proposed development will occur in a district zoned as an historic conservation overlay district, describe how your proposal conforms with the intent of preserving, enhancing the conservation of the unique historic character of this neighborhood. So it's a kind of general statement, but we wanted to put that language in there to make sure that any of these proposals would describe how what they're proposing to develop fits in to that historic character and preserves it. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that and get response, get the commission's view of something like that being added, which we saw as something that really was needed for this type of RFP.
Anyone have any questions? Aaron?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to echo that, one of my concerns, and to Ms. Smith's point about historic preservation is, the caveat in this RFP that we want to preserve historic structures is important to me, certainly as a citizen, as a representative, and from everything I've heard from constituents, this RFP, these properties deserve some sort of recognition, and certainly folks who are invested in these properties eventually maybe deserve some sort of mention in RFP. But I think just as important is, at least from my standpoint, is I want to be transparent in processes in this city. And when you send out an RFP that says, doesn't say there will be a preference for historic preservation, that's not really transparent in my mind, because I'm going to sit there as a council member and be for the preservation of the property. And that bidder may not know that. And that bidder may not know that the majority of council will be for that historic preservation. And so, maybe it's just a personal policy of being upfront and honest, but I think that the RFP, I think just as much as historic preservation is important, I think it's also important to include in the RFP kind of an upfront message to bidders of really what the city's intent is. And I suspect that is hopefully to preserve some of our history.
Does anyone have any questions?
No question, comments.
Comment?
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree with a lot of what's being said. When I read through this current proposal, on page 13, it says all parcels being made available, blah, 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 are within this mixed-use area in the Capitol Avenue Neighborhood Conservation District. Identify any changes to either underlying zoning or overlay zoning that may be necessary to accomplish your redevelopment plan. The way that's worded to me says that right up front, we expect that you will not be able to comply with what's already in place in this district. And that may be just my reading of it, but it just already says like, we don't expect you to comply with the ordinances that are already in place for this area, so just go ahead and give us your excuses why you're not going to comply. So I have concerns about that wording, and I think it goes back to Councilman Neely's point about transparency. Like, the intent of this whole past 10 years or so of East Capitol has been to do what we can to preserve this site. So even though there's only 4 properties in this redevelopment area that are left standing, I do think as part of the language in this, maybe there needs to be some kind of rubric that says, as these are developed, highest consideration will be given to whether it's the rehabilitation or the infill that might happen in these empty lots. Consideration will be given to proposals that comply with the existing overlay district. Because I think it does talk about infill. It's been a long time since I've read the outline of that, but Holly, it does talk about infill. So, I mean, that would be a good rubric. That seems like, or a piece of the rubric. To Jenny's point, I mean, there have been, 10 people. I don't know if this was one, the list of people who put money down. I don't know if that was 3 people or 10 people, but it seems to me that there is a point too that if you've already shown, interest in redeveloping these properties and you're presenting a proposal, then, you might not get 10 points, but you might get a point or 2 in weight. But I do think there needs to be some kind of rubric that goes out with the RFP that establishes that, at the end of the day, hopefully not, maybe at the end of the day, the best proposal may be to develop, but it needs to be weighed within all these other considerations and the interest of the current property owners and the 10 years of trying to do something with East Capitol to conserve some of the characteristics of that street.
So I do have some comments if I may. So one of the things is future processes. So if you have, let's bring up 101 Jackson, it's a good example. They went through housing authority, it was acquired by transformational housing. They wanted to comply with the overlay, but they wanted to add 5 units. So they went through planning and zoning, did a PUD plan. That would be that step, right? So if you have somebody that comes in, submits a proposal, and by right it's mixed use with the overlay, they would have to design based off of that, and then they could build. If they want to deviate from that, they would have to go through what would likely be either a rezoning or a PUD process. So I think, and I may defer, I think the intent was to get that up front during this RFP process versus being surprised with it on the back end after it had already been.
Well, maybe that should be part of that rubric. So, I mean, we want to know everything. I mean, this is about transparency, the redevelopment process. But I do think if you have 4 proposals for one property, and there are 2 that are for rehabilitation, and or 3 that are for rehabilitation, 1 that's demolition, then those 3 that are for rehabilitation should have some weight to doing that, even if like the 3rd of those 3 requires future variances from the current overlay district. But unless people know that at the beginning, I mean, I don't think it's unfair for people to ask for a rubric of some kind. And I think that's fair, and that will help all those people out there wanting to do proposals, whether it's 2 or 40, have better guidelines to know whether or not they want to go forward with the redevelopment, their own redevelopment proposal to begin with. Does that make sense? But if those criteria aren't there, then nobody getting these proposals are going to have a way to assess the value of that proposal for the larger intent of preserving what's left of if anything of East Capitol, or moving forward in a development pattern that is consistent with what we want as a community for that area.
Rachel, question. As I understood what Aaron proposed and what came out of the city council is we are supposed to be looking at this RFP to amend to be able to then go to the zoning or planning. I can't remember which committee, planning and zoning committee for their consideration prior to coming back to council, right?
Well, it'd be Public Works and Planning.
Public Works and Planning, thank you.
So it'll be special meeting today. If this body has recommendations for changes within the existing RFP or no changes within the existing RFP, we'll put it in a memo to City Council and we'll include it in the Public Works and Planning packet. The Public Works and Planning meeting is next Thursday.
Ellen, I have several motions for the RFP.
Do we have any other discussion before we get into a motion?
I have some comments, Chair.
Okay. Laura?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. As we know, we did receive a draft copy of this, asking for our comments and suggestions. The two main points that have been brought up by the public and others on the commission, I did in writing share my concerns and suggestions. I too didn't like the fact that there was a call for full demolition and asked that rehab and restoration carry a greater weight or first consideration. And also by asking potential developers to identify issues that they would have with the overlay district and the mixed use district. I didn't think we should be opening that door either. So I really think we need to, if we do choose to amend, address those two areas. However, the more I have thought about this, you know, if our goal is to save and to have appropriate infill in that area for all the historic structures surrounding those empty lots, I'm almost thinking that 2 RFPs would be better. The first one going out immediately, as soon as possible for just the structures. And that way we won't have proposals come in for a structure in the 2 lots that are next to it, you know, and because with the goal of being to demo the structure so something big could be built. And that way, if you know there are no viable proposals on those structures, then they can be a part of the second RFP that's just for, you know, lots. But it would have to include, their proposal would have to include demo. I don't know. I just, if full demolition is left in this RFP, I just think that it gives a greater chance of us losing what's left. And the only way I think to avoid that is just to do a structure RFP and a vacant lot RFP. But those are just my thoughts. And I apologize for not being there. I don't have a car. We have a car in the shop, so.
Ellen, I do have one more question.
Okay.
Rachel, under the number 6, evaluation criteria, it said the city council shall select the developer and development plan. is that actually city council or is that representatives of the city council, whether it's planning and development or it's HPC or who is actually going to do the evaluation according to this RFP?
It would be city council.
It would be the city council members. Okay. How many times does that really ever happen? I mean, when we do ambulances, police cars, it's not city council members who actually do the evaluation criteria, right?
Well, when the two properties that we owned, that we went out through RFP, so 413 and 419, it was this almost, was it the same RFP? Very similar. It wasn't the same process. We put out the RFP, we had five, is that right? Five proposals that were submitted. And it was in a closed session where each one of the proposers came in and where city council asked some questions about what they needed, what it was going to look like, and that's how those properties were redeveloped. And if I may, I want to, because I know the intent of the conversation, but we want to look forward to what's down. When you have 5 existing structures, 15 vacant lots. The vacant lots could be as important as the lots that have the structures on them, because you're talking about infill and you're talking about design. If there was, and I think if I'm reading the room correctly, there's a fear of somebody coming in with a larger development. If somebody wants to come in with a larger development, there's additional processes that they have to go through. You can't take an entire corner without going to planning and zoning. And then that would you'd have an extra layer of going through the planning and zoning commission and then going to city council for that rezoning. So there's a lot of steps in there. I think council accepting a redevelopment proposal would not be the end-all be-all. There would be extra layers in there. But from a preservation standpoint, the new construction is just as important as those existing structures there. So having the ability to throw out all of your tools out on the table and seeing what creative thoughts are coming from the development community or folks that are wanting to rehab but maybe want to, because those are very narrow lots. So I could very well see if somebody wanted 401 East Capitol and then maybe wanted the lot next to it to have some parking space or some yard, because otherwise you're going to have a lot with just a building on it.
Oh, I've been through it when we had our house and the garage. We had to make a subdivision out of those 2 lots.
Right, and with especially the 400 block, there's so many options that you could do right there, including that is inclusive of rehab, inclusive of historic preservation. But if you start carving out pieces of the RFP, you could, may not, but you could be limiting possibilities for rehab in that way. And so I know there's a lot of this proposal, people are always look at it through the lens of what their viewpoints are. But sometimes having that flexibility and being open gives you the most creative options for rehab. But that's up to the commission on how you want to look at it. I wanted to make sure you could see, because it's once the redevelopment, if a redevelopment proposal is accepted, there could still be more layers of approval processes if they're wanting to do something that's outside of the mixed use with the overlay.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yeah, I've got a couple different amendments. I got to figure out which section I'm on now. Lost where I was. Okay. Under section 2, information about the redevelopment plan.
Page 12.
Yeah, and actually on 13, under that same paragraph, the first bullet point on there, I want to delete the sentence, identify any changes to either the underlying zoning and overlaying zoning may be necessary to accomplish the redevelopment plan described in the bid, and amend by adding, deleting that period after district and adding, and plans submitted should demonstrate compliance with those.
Donna, can you go back through that? I'm having a hard time following.
I will read how I've got it to read.
And this is the
add.
bullet point that starts out all parcels.
All parcels.
Be made, okay.
Yeah, it'll say all parcels being made available under this RFP are within the mixed-use MU1 zoning district and the Capitol Avenue Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District. Delete that period. And all plans submitted should demonstrate compliance with those. And then delete the entire next sentence. And if you need it in two motions.
All plans submitted shall comply
with those.
with the, because you struck through, you went in the mixed use.
Yeah, or with it, comply with the mixed use and overlay districts.
Sure.
Yes.
May I make a comment on the motion? The intent of the motion is.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I just want to make a comment on the motion. Thank you for the motion and the intent of the motion. I suspect staff, this motion, as Rachel said, would get forwarded if approved by this body, but for review by the Public Works and Planning Committee and the City Council. But I assume in the meantime, staff will also address that with the inclusion of properties on not in the neighborhood commercial zoning, neighborhood commercial district. I can't think of the East Miller Street, I guess, is what I'm trying to think of. So when East Miller and Jefferson.
611. 611, Jefferson.
Yeah, when those were added at the end of a Public Works and Planning Committee meeting to this RFP, there was oversight by staff in identifying that those aren't in those zoning. So I just want to clarify.
So the intent is to do separate RFPs for those, completely separate from this process. Since this isn't in the neighborhood, those will go out separately.
Okay, then I would maybe just make a comment that Commission Member Dietz may want to, as part of her motion, indicate that that would be a motion for both RFPs.
So just to add, I'm a little mixed up on which ones. I'm sorry, Aaron.
That's okay. Just to clarify that both those two properties and their separate RFP and the properties on Capitol should, that your motion that
essentially any changes to this RFP also be reflected in those two other.
It's that follow these guidelines are going to be prioritized, that language be in both RFPs.
But you're saying it already will be?
That's the intention.
Perfect, thank you. Sorry.
So, Rachel, can you reread her motion?
Sure. I have, okay, on page 13.
First full bullet point.
Yeah, under proposal requirements, and it's that first full bullet point where it says all parcels being made available under this RFP are within the mixed-use zoning district and the Capitol Avenue Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District. That is requested to be struck. And then also, then it would be all plans submitted shall comply with the mixed-use zoning district and the Capitol Avenue Conservation Overlay District. And then strike through, identify any changes to either underlying zoning or overlay zoning that may be necessary to accomplish the redevelopment plan described in the bid.
I have mixed feelings about striking that language altogether. I do
Okay, so hang on a second. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, now discussion.
Okay, so I have a little bit of concern because I do think that there are rehabilitation projects that are possible that might require identification of possible changes in the overlay or mixed use district. So I hate to think that language is struck out altogether. Instead, maybe say that all plans will identify how the plan will comply with that, with the overlay and the mixed use, and identify changes that may be required to accomplish the redevelopment plan. Because then it's not it's a this and. Does that make sense? Like they just need to describe how they're going to comply or how they showcase that, but they also identify whether or not there may be alternative or changes that need to be made to fully meet the requirements of the plan.
So
I
you
don't
bring
know
that as a friendly amendment to her?
Can I make sure that we're all on the same page?
Yeah.
I have all plans will address the ability to comply with the mixed use zoning district and the Capitol Avenue neighborhood conservation overlay district. The second part is where I'm.
And identify changes to the underlying zoning or overlay district that may be necessary to accomplish the plan. Does that make sense? Then there's this idea that, I need to actually look at this redevelopment and overlay district before I, and take that into consideration as I'm submitting my redevelopment plan. But it also acknowledges that not every plan out there is going to be able, I may be able to take this property and rehab it, but I may also need to do a few other steps in the future to,
Because it's,
does that make sense? Yeah.
Okay, so Donna, do you accept her?
well, I think it's adding just that piece along with where we're saying it has to comply with that, when they present it and have any, variations. I'm trying to figure out if you can say both, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes.
So,
They seem to contradict each other.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of.
so.
And again, we're opening the door. Like Rachel was saying earlier, there are, different avenues that they can present that, through the permit process and identify changes then. And then those changes will come to us as part of the overlay district for approval.
That's what they did with 101, right?
I guess my question is, though, along that is, if that says any design proposal must comply when it comes in, then if it does not comply with that, then the city council cannot approve it because that is a requirement of proposal. Does that make sense? Then that, I don't know.
Go ahead.
I said
But why have them identify it if
Can you, Claire,
they must comply?
hang on. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So, as the drafter of the RFP, I want to just add some context. So that language about the zoning. There have been 8 redevelopment projects in this neighborhood. 2 of them have required changes to the overlay district, changes to the zoning, which were accomplished through a PUD. So what this was trying to recognize is that there may be changes necessary to accomplish a project. And we would like to know about that on the front end. Under the proposed language that Ms. Dietz has put forward, if 101 Jackson and 500 East Capitol, so the transformational housing project, and then the rehabilitation to Ivy Terrace, if those were going under this language, neither one of those would even be eligible. So they could not be selected. And I don't think that that would be the intent of this body or the city council. So that is what that language was trying to reflect, is that there may be changes necessary even for projects that are attempting to honor the overlay. And so we want to know about that on the front end and not have any got you moments on the back end. And so if I can make a suggestion to and I think it's very in line with what Ms. Patterson is trying to say, if there is a requirement or a piece of language in the RFP that says, please demonstrate how your project complies, and then explain any modifications that may be necessary. Perhaps that is the middle ground, as opposed to using hard and fast shall and must type language. So that way it accomplishes what I think you were talking about. Tell us what are your attempts to comply, and then identify the things that are going to make it impossible to comply. And then we can evaluate whether those are things that we want to consider. So I'd be really, really concerned about the shall and must language. But I think recognizing, first tell us about how you are going to comply. I think maybe what this body is maybe trying to zero in on, as opposed to saying, we don't even want to accept proposals that look a lot like 101 Jackson and 500 East Capitol.
Rachel, I think when I said it, and maybe I didn't say it right, I said, and plans submitted should demonstrate how they are complying with those.
I think we may have got shall.
No, she said
I
should.
should.
Okay.
And
written
I
down
said
as shall.
I changed it to shall, and I know there's a big difference.
Sorry,
between
that's
the two.
right.
I do too. There's a big difference in those two.
All plans submitted should comply with MU, with
No,
the
demonstrate how they will comply with, because that's a little bit of a different than they have to.
Shall is with the restriction. Where are you with your?
And then you can do it.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. But I do think that it should be front-loaded toward compliance, but not cutting off if there have to be some modifications to comply.
Then we could accept your friendly amendment.
Okay, so do you have her friendly amendment also?
Just to leave that other sentence in.
I'm gonna give it a go.
I'm sorry, Rachel.
That's okay.
I should have written all this out.
I just want to make sure. So there's a motion for all plans submitted should demonstrate compliance with the mixed use zoning district and the Capitol Avenue neighborhood conservation overlay district.
Okay, that's her motion, right?
Okay, and then
the friendly amendment,
we want to. Do you want to keep identify any changes to either the underlying zoning or overlay zoning that may be necessary to accomplish the redevelopment plan described in the bid?
Yes.
You want to keep that?
I
Okay.
think that could be,
Yes.
you have the other in there.
Okay.
okay, so you accept her friendly amendment, okay? So we need a first vote on her motion, on Donna's motion first. So,
I have a question, Chair, just
okay,
a minute, regarding the word, we used should, correct?
yes.
Should is advisory. Should we change that to shall? That has more teeth.
No,
No?
no.
That's where Ryan was just describing, that it eliminates all other possibilities if we put shall. Right?
I thought it was the other way around. Okay.
My question is, I guess if it shall comply, blah blah blah, then it does. But can it say it shall demonstrate blah blah blah, or I don't know. Should it demonstrate compliance, or shall it demonstrate compliance?
Should.
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 Okay. Should. I'm good. Okay.
Isn't that
Sorry.
correct,
I think
Brian?
I'm overthinking it.
Demonstrate compliance.
I think that's better language that allows
Flexibility.
some flexibility, but also saying, show us what are your attempts to comply.
Okay, so we're voting on the motion to begin with. And Amanda, you're going to do a roll call vote Are you ready? You're going to call on each of us to vote, and Laura, okay? All right,
Patterson,
Yes.
Mr. Wheat,
yes.
Ms. Dietz. Yes. Mr. Schaefer,
Yes.
and Ms. Ward.
Yes.
Okay, and the motion carries. Now we're going to vote on the friendly amendment. We're going to do the same thing again.
Ms. Patterson,
Yes.
Mr. Wheat,
Yes.
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 Schaefer,
Parliamentary, you're supposed to do
Laura.
it the other way, but I think it works.
Yes.
That's not how I've ever done
So what's the friendly amendment?
It's just to leave that.
The
it. The friendly
sentence.
amendment that
We
she
keep-
accepted.
okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that we keep the sentence about identifying.
Okay, so now you have another motion.
Yeah.
You ready, Rach?
Yeah.
Under number 6, evaluation criteria.
What page?
I'm sorry, it's page 14. Okay. I'm gonna read it the way, and then you can write in however, make your notes. The city council and/or its representatives, meaning whatever commissions, shall select the developer and development plan that, and delete, in its sole discretion. Best serves the residents and businesses of Jefferson City, considering all information and factors outlined in this RFP and otherwise available information based on evaluation criteria scorecard, rubric, or whatever word you want to use for that. I've got more, but get that part first.
Can I ask? So you're putting power, I think if you putting and/or its representatives, you're not identifying the decision maker.
Well, that's why I was asking the question earlier about, would the city council actually do it? Because I know if we're doing,
The city council is the ultimate decision maker on decisions, especially in real estate. So in real estate in real estate developments and basically any real estate deal is the city council making the decision. It's not delegated to anyone else. I believe it's actually an undelegatable power.
oh, okay, so yeah, that's the reason I
And
asked.
So whether the city council can use a body for recommendation, they can do whatever they want.
Okay,
But
so
the
we can
decision
scrap
has
it
to be
for its
the
representatives.
city council as a whole.
That's the reason I asked the question earlier, because I did not know what that was. So then it would be, you wouldn't have to worry about and/or. So you're actually just deleting in its sole discretion, which we were talking about for, now I've lost my train of thought. In that, you've got other information, other input from committees and so forth. And then adding to it based on the evaluation criteria scorecard. And I'm just looking at that as you can call it whatever you want.
Yeah. That's up to the city.
Is there appropriate word rather than evaluation scorecard? Tiffany used rubric,
There's a
but
couple of different questions there.
Grading scale.
So I just want to be really, really honest with you. I will make a very hard recommendation that a rote application of a mathematical problem not be used. That is used very, very rarely in any type of purchase by the city. The only time we would ever really use that is if we're like buying commodities, like we're buying concrete or widgets or bolts or bullets. every bid that the city does, there is discretion to award it to the lowest. So usually it's purchasing, so usually it's lowest and best. And so basically every single time the city does a business transaction that's approved by the city council, the city has the ability to use discretion. Lowest and best, highest and best. For the city council to jettison its discretion to a hard mathematical scorecard, we don't do that.
We did. Our grants, when we evaluated who was gonna get grants for redevelopment of the downtown area, we specifically set up some scorecards.
And scorecards are fine. Scorecards are always fine. And they can be good tools. But to say that whoever scores highest, no matter what, that's who we're selecting, that removes a piece of discretion that is built into basically every city council decision. And I cannot recommend that to the city council. So I want you to I don't want to surprise anyone.
The scoring matrix for the grants, that's something that's required through the federal government. So the city council didn't make any decisions on who. The Historic Preservation Commission acted as the decision-making body on who was going to get those grant funds. So it's a little bit different when you're selling property through a proposal process.
We still have to have a mechanism in place that's going to give, I want to call them points, to those who are going to redevelop as opposed to demolish, to give credit to those who have put down the monies, whatever.
We're thinking on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
Does this body want to review the proposals that are received and make a recommendation based off of that instead of trying to back this into a scoring matrix or back it into trying to create some sort of mechanism that benefits rehabilitation of the properties versus
You mean
clearance?
the proposals come to us to
We put out
do a recommendation?
We put out the RFP and recommended as far as this RFP process is that it goes through Historic Preservation Commission. The Historic Preservation Commission weighs in on what proposals should be selected as a recommendation to City Council.
I would love to do that.
Yeah.
Done.
Instead of, because I think the challenge with the scoring, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, my concern is making sure that the people who put money down get some consideration for their proposals in here, whether it's extra points or, we know who's done what, and that rehab comes before demolition. Because that was the purpose of all of this stuff we started, 10 years ago, was to make sure that we got these buildings where they could be saved, they could tell the story of Jefferson City down the road. And we need to make sure there's some way of doing that. And if it's just this body knowing that when they do their proposal, and send the recommendations up.
I will note, this body could not make that final decision, but you could have the weight of a recommendation for the city council. That way, at least the city council would because I think, he left. But I think that was one of Councilman Mealy's concerns, is that he felt like there wasn't the weigh-in. So if this body has review capabilities of the proposals that are received through this RFP process, we could put it in a memo. The HPC would create a memo that gets sent to City Council, and that way each City Council member knows how the HPC feels about each one of the proposals that were submitted.
I like, do I want to make a motion? I make a motion that language be added to the RFP under evaluation criteria that the Historic Preservation Commission be able to review and make a recommendation to the city council before city council.
Action taken.
Final action. I'm sure that could be smoothed out, that language, but my intent is that yes, that you have the opportunity to comment on the RFQ and provide recommendations before the city council makes a decision.
And that's where I was coming from with the and/or representatives. Same difference.
I second Tiffany's motion.
First and second, do we have any discussion?
So just to let you know, so unless the city council would vote otherwise, those reviews and recommendation would be closed.
Closed.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you that, Ryan, if we would have to do a closed session for this.
Unless the city council instructed otherwise, that would be the path.
I have no problem with that.
Okay, so we have a first and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call vote?
Ms. Patterson? Aye. Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer?
Yes.
Ms. Ward?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I kind of did everything else that I had written about the scorecard.
Okay. Do we have any other motions? Anyone else? Okay. Anything else from you, Rachel?
Just that so these recommendations will go to Public Works and Planning, then City Council.
You may want to recap what's going to go.
Sure. So what we have is that we have changing the language. We're going to put it in the memo. Staff will write up a memo. I'll make sure to send it out to the HPC members before we send it forward to make sure we capture it correctly. The motion that was passed for page 13, that first bullet point, we strike through the all parcels being made available under this RFP are used within the mixed-use zoning district and the Capitol Avenue Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District. In place of that, we're going to put all plans submitted should demonstrate compliance within the mixed-use district and overlay district, and identify any changes to either the underlying zoning or overlay zoning that may be necessary to accomplish the redevelopment plan described in the bid.
Did we actually strike through that first sentence, or we just
struck through it?
we didn't strike through the first sentence? We just added the shall.
Yeah, should.
Should demonstrate.
Okay.
How they will comply. And then
Okay.
Isn't it adding, not striking?
So the all parcels being made under this RFP are within the mixed use, or should demonstrate that they're within the mixed use zoning district in the Capitol Avenue Neighborhood Conservation Overlay District.
No, the first sentence is just a statement. That's the statement of fact. All these properties are within that district. So that's just a statement of fact. So the second sentence should read something like all
plans submitted should demonstrate compliance with
that zoning and overlay district and identify any changes. Because the first sentence is.
So you're okay with the all parcels being made available under this RFP?
Well, that's just true. That's just a statement of fact. And that's a good thing to tell whoever's making that this is the case.
So we're plugging in a sentence between the two.
Right.
We're just adding before identify all plans should demonstrate compliance with the zoning and overlay district and identify any changes.
Okay.
She had it right. She just has to figure out her notes.
I have to listen to the recordings and listen to the
Okay, anything else, Rachel?
Yes, so under the evaluation criteria, we're going to request that the Historic Preservation Commission receive all proposals and make a recommendation to council.
Good. Okay, our next regular meeting is May the 14th. I want to thank everyone for being here today. Taking it out. you have anything else to tell us? Okay, we have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.